Welcome back to Pixel Perfect Marathon number 3. We are back with a very, very special bonus run here. It is the first time that we have a TAS run, and we have got Leo Kedron here who's going to be showing us Trauma Center, Under the Knife 2, XOps. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Leo. I developed the 2 tool-assisted speedruns for Under the Knife 2. This one is the XOps All XS. So what that means is the TAS is going to be being as efficient as possible, while also achieving the highest grade possible. Now, certain effort was kind of put in to either get the exact score needed, because the way the game works is there is a scoring system based on time, how good you play the game, essentially. And given that the TAS can be hyper efficient with inputs on every frame, it essentially results in a disgustingly fast run that humans cannot compete with, while also basically flexing on everyone because it can do it so precisely. If you haven't seen any Trauma Center games before, then I will briefly preface it with, we are doing anime surgery. There's no plot to this particular category because we are doing the hardest operations possible. It is basically a demonstration of the guilt or neo-guilt types in the game. If you don't know what those are, don't worry, I will do my best to explain everything supersonic fast, but there is a lot to cover, because as with any TAS showcase, everything is super condensed down because of how efficient it is. Anyway, with all of that kind of preamble out of the way, with explaining sort of what's special about this TAS, I'm going to start the video to let it play through, and I'll count in when we start time RTA, because it's different for a TAS versus when you do an actual run. So I'll get that started with the video starting now, and the TAS starts right away. From the moment that power is on from the emulator, input's already being put in to skip this cutscene, and to load the save file for this particular category. And so time will start in 3, 2, 1, go. So the first thing to note is we just skip through all this text. We just hit select on the earliest frame possible. And this is Kiriaki. The main thing to note is the TAS will need to suture stuff, cut Kiriaki out, and then ultrasound as well. There's a lot going on. I'll try and sort of let it play out for the first little bit, and then I'll try and explain what's going on a bit more specifically. So we've got to drain all this stuff. We'll close everything up and suture. And now we need to find these little bat things. And already they're dead. As a player, trying to laser these can be a frustrating experience. But this now section, we need to extract some eggs, as well as killing off Kiriaki, this bat going around. Now you notice the TAS is taking a lot of time here to boost vitals. That's because every time it cuts out an egg or Kiriaki, huge amounts of damage come in, to the point where the TAS hits 0. Now, that's all very well calculated out, and here we'll see the vitals go up a bit as we need some extra points for the XS. But just like that, that's the TAS achieving XS for Kiriaki X1. And you'll see here the exact points meets 11,000, which is the exact requirement for getting XS on that particular guild. The next one, we'll move on, and this one unfortunately is a bit more boring, as if I remember right, this is Tatati, where we just have to play Simon Says with the game. We have to inject the right color into the right thing floating around. It's pretty boring, but as a player, this particular XOps can be kind of frustrating because you have to inject basically the exact amount in a very short period of time. And while, yes, you could use the healing touch, which is a gameplay feature where you can slow down time, of course, TAS doesn't need that. It essentially becomes real life healing touch. So you can see here, basically what we do is just go through all of the tools, doing a bit of a tool roulette, and doing some suture art like stars, but it basically just goes through every cycle instantly, injecting each color the moment it's available. So I'll kind of take this time to explain why a TAS is kind of significant, because if you only watch speedruns, you might not quite understand how much work goes into a TAS, because there's lots of small optimizations that you might not necessarily see normally. Like in this one, It's just, injecting things at the exact frame. But it's for other operations, it's knowing how does RNG impact how the next sort of steps will take place. So it's that kind of thing that under the hood, there's a lot going on. Now we're moving on to Pempty, and I will deeply apologize for the laser noises you're about to hear for the next minute and a half, 2 minutes. Because simply put, the way you kill Pempty is you need to laser the cores until they die, which is pretty straightforward. So first of all, we're gonna inject some nanomachines, son. But we take the time to write some Morse code. Feel free to decode that at any time if you like. But what we're gonna do is, we're gonna laser. Once we've got the core exposed, we're going to laser it through here. And again, I deeply apologize for this awful lasering sound. It's a byproduct of how the TAS is actually itself made, and how essentially the audio gets encoded into the video. It's awful. So essentially what Pempty does is it has 3 mini cores. It has laceration cores, which are these pink red ones, tumor cores, which were those bluish ones, and vital damage cores, which are those grey ones that circle around. The TAS will basically not let any of these get through unless it's for certain circumstances. Because the biggest problem with Pempty for XS is that you have to get certain score. You also have to meet a certain chain requirement. TAS is too efficient and, simply put, won't achieve that normally. We have to kind of make certain exploits to allow that to be achieved. So we'll laser these things coming through and we'll suture up any cuts that appear, any little tumors. But essentially we just have to laser the core. Now what makes this a particularly difficult op for both human players and for TAS is just the sheer amount of damage. I mean, the TAS hasn't done any vital boosting, and already you can see that we're now down at 49 vitals. So if things get out of control, or even in a controlled manner, it gets very hectic very quickly and very easy to lose the patient. Thankfully, the TAS doesn't have to go out of its way to make sure that doesn't happen. It basically just is as efficient as it can be, and it will deal with things before it gets out of hand. So this is the last hit on the top core, and now we need to deal with the bottom core, but we cannot kill it instantly. As mentioned, there is a chain requirement for this op to get the maximum grade. So TAS will have to basically just keep getting rid of these mini cores over and over. Now, an optimization that I thought of before I could implement it was actually to do this stage much earlier on. You can see how quickly these cores come out in comparison to standard gameplay. So one optimization that I'm aware of is to change that. But as with any speedrun, TAS is included, they can be improved upon and worked on down the line, be that a few months to a year or even more longer than that. And as tech and ideas sort of get introduced, we can find faster ways of doing it. Now, unfortunately, there's a small problem with the XOps category, and it's you get thrown into multiple kind of boring operations. So we've had Tatati, where we just inject stuff. We've had Pempty, where we just laser stuff for ages. And now we get Noose. And Noose, we have to just drain and cut things out. And to achieve the highest possible grade, we have to make sure that we don't burst anything. So you'll see what's going to happen here is some tumors are going to appear, these little spore tumors, and then Noose itself in the middle. And we have to drain and cut them in the order they spawn in. For TAS, this is super trivial because we already know the order it's going to be in, and we can then retrospectively go back and do things in the correct order without any issues. So what we're doing here is we are draining, cutting, and then moving on to the next one and extracting them all in one go to optimize switching tools. Switching tools costs 4 frames. 2 frames to select the tool, and then 2 frames to switch. So it has that requirement of needing to waste frames essentially to do that. Now in moments like these, it doesn't matter because there's nothing happening, but in order to get excess, we have to meet, once again, a chain requirement, and so we cannot let any of these burst. So TAS has a little bit of fun showing you exactly where these spores are going to spawn in, and the order they'll spawn in as well. But they'll cut it all out and, again, keep working through Noose. Now, if I remember right, this will be the last wave. We did a small little boost there, and that was to meet the exact grade requirements. As I mentioned, anytime the TAS can meet the exact grade, a lot of work was put in to make that happen. Trying to do this as a human player is pretty much an impossible task, unless you know exactly how many seconds you've spent and how many points go into vitals. So it's very difficult to try and achieve as a human. But TAS, being frame perfect, can do anything it likes. So we've gone through 4 of the 7 already, and these next 2 are a little bit more interesting in terms of how they function. So this one will essentially demonstrate how we need to again sort of abuse how chain works and how many points we can get, because this op wasn't an issue of chain, but this one was more specifically an issue of points, which is very counterintuitive for the TAS, because there is a score bonus for how long you take. Now, if the TAS is frame perfect, then it's going to get an insane amount of time bonus. But if time bonus isn't enough to essentially get this the score high enough for this XS requirement, we will have to grind it out and specifically get cools. Now, cools give, if I'm alright, it's 200 points. In this particular operation, it can vary depending on what exactly has been done. But you can see here, we're now just waiting. So realistically, the TAS is going to suture up any of those wounds and keep the vitals nice and high while we wait for Biothos to create some lacerations that are desperately needed. And this is where the RNG kind of comes in, because we need to see which values are going to be best and what might be optimized. So there's a reason why we call this anime malpractice simulator, because right now we are quite literally performing malpractice. We're just letting the patient suffer just so we can get an excess, which is a common trend across, regardless of a human run or a TAS run, of just letting the patient suffer just because we can. So Biothos is now knocked down to 1 HP, so one little laser like that will mean that it's ready to go. So TAS is going to suture up the patient here, and it's going to put on a cool bandage as it gives even more points, and those are very much needed. If I remember right, this particular one was not an exact excess, because trying to achieve that was a little bit awkward. It might be, I can't remember. It's been a little while, and these values are kind of arbitrary for each one. There's no consistency across each of the ops. But yeah, we have X6 now, and this is CG. And the main thing to note here is this: if you ever watch an XOps run, not even XS, but just an XOps run of CG from any runner, you will very quickly see how TAS essentially makes a joke out of this. And that's the main reason for that is because it can cut CG pretty much instantly. Before the fog even fully disappears, it's already done. So most of the time we just spend the op like looking at this grey clouds just disappearing over and over. And TAS is working in the background to clean up any wounds that might appear, because that does happen, and already it's dead. So you can just see by the IGT 438, that was, in the game's perspective, done in less than 25 seconds, which is pretty absurd. Most players can't even achieve anywhere close to that. But we now have the big final boss of the game, Alethea. And I would argue this is probably one of my favorite bosses across the entire Trauma Center community's like sort of set of final bosses. And the main reason for that is because of the sort of complexity, the steps needed. It isn't just a case of you laser it a bit, or you have to. Well, I think every boss is generally just laser a bit, now that I think about it. This one actually does require set steps. So TAS here, as Alethea kind of spawns in, it reveals itself on the heart. We will have to laser any kind of immatures that come along with it, its variant, any guilt types, and then inject this serum. And once the serum has been injected enough, eventually what happens is it will expose itself and a set of red wires will appear. But that has to be done in a certain order for that to happen, and very efficiently. But for XS, we need a certain amount of points. So it's actually much better to move on to a new cycle of guilt, because you get a stupid amount of points for that. So TAS here is cutting the wires in a very particular order to optimize how much time it spends. Again, injecting these this serum here into the eye repeatedly, because essentially we need to progress that as far as possible, be that on this cycle or on the next one, and so doing it on this cycle just saves as much time as possible. We've got Alethea Tatati here, just inject it, and just like that, that's a whole bunch of free points for the TAS. And again, cutting these wires, this is incredibly nerve-wracking as a human player. So TAS just being able to effortlessly and just go around and cut each one perfectly is almost comical in a way. So again, TAS is going to inject this serum each time it removes one of these little eye cores. And Vital's getting a little bit low, which, of course, that's how TAS likes to roll, nice and low, as mimicking its creators of running this game basically as low vitals as possible. TAS again waiting for another cycle here to get more points. And on the final section of main cutting, as we do have one more set here after this, using that same pattern because it's so consistent. And we now move on to basically the last little bit of TAS, which is draw a butterfly, the only time that we ever do, and cut out these wires in a very specific order. And the main reason for that is because the cycle is pretty consistent. You can read it quite well. And if one of these wires is wiggling, you'll notice when it's being cut, it kind of either flashes in and out of existence or it wiggles a bit. If that's done before the wire sort of comes around and it closes it, it's much slower. We've even noticed that in human player runs as well. But that was the final boss. TAS made it look absurdly easy. And again, it's just going to wrap up with a nice quick bandage on 0 vitals. It's no big deal. But time will be coming up when we see the final XS. So that'll be in just a moment once we see the grade here and when we're back on the main screen. So in 3, 2, 1, and time. So yeah, that was an absurdly fast run of UTK2's XOps, all XS. I hope you enjoyed that. I know that was a lot to go through and probably not enough time to fully appreciate. I would highly recommend, if you want to kind of see it a bit more, see an individual op, this is posted elsewhere for you to sort of enjoy at your own leisure, as trying to commentate over this is incredibly wild. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that very absurd, incredibly optimized run of the XOps all XS category.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Leo. I think, very special for us to have the first TAS run here at Pixel Perfect. Just incredible. Just, frame perfect. Well, pixel perfect runs there. So thank you so much for that. So we are going to continue our amazing stream of runs. We're going to take a short intermission, but do not go anywhere. We have a run of Marble Madness. Stick around for more.